We will be discussing one auditing standard and auditing 260 now, which is of communications with those charged with governance. The earlier standards, which SC 265, that was regarding the communication with those charged with the governance or management of only the matter of internal controls. There is in that SA 265 nothing else you are communicating. But in case of this standard of SA 260, we are communicating with those charged with governance for each and every matters, including the internal controls. There 265 is specifically for deficiencies in internal controls. SA 260 is not for that, only for that purpose, but for any purpose you want to communicate with the person in charge of the governance. So that's the basic difference. You must understand what is the difference between SA 260, which you are communicating to the person in charge of the governance, and SA 265, you are also communicating to the person in charge of the governance. What is the difference between these two? Difference between these two standards is that 265 is exclusively for the deficiencies in internal control, and for SA 260 is for any purpose, including weaknesses and deficiencies in internal controls. Now, you maybe have a questions in that. Question may be that what is the need of SA 265 then? It is for only for internal control, and this 260 for every type of communications, any type of communication including internal control you want to make to the management or person in charge of the governance. So, what is the need of SA 265? Do you understand? The need of 265 is that this SA 265 talks about the significant deficiencies in the internal controls, and that is the letter which is generally given at the end of the audit exercise. And the SA 260 which we are discussing now, this letter can be given, and this letter can be given in so many parts also. This letter talks about any communications, and there may be a number of communications with the person in charge of the governance or the management. They may be given even at the commencement of the audit, in between of the audit, and at the end of the audit also. Whereas SA 265 is generally given at the end at the conclusion of the auditings. Maybe before reporting under SA 200, SA 700, the main auditor's report, you may be giving this letter 265 letter, SA 265 letter to the persons in charge of the governance. But SA 260 letter which we are discussing now, it can be given any time at the when you started an audit, because the matters, the contents of this 265 is large one, and those matters can be discussed. Those matters may arise in the beginning, in middle of the audit, or at the end of the audit. Now we go to the 260, which are specific, which will be understanding what are those matters are. First, what is the scope and objective of these standards? This standard deals with the auditor's responsibility to communicate. First, you must understand this is the responsibility of the auditors. Means it is not a choice of the auditors that he does not follow this SA 260. It's a responsibility of the auditors as per this auditing standards to communicate with those charged with the governance in relation to audit of financial statement, in relation of audit of financial statement, whatever communication may be. It is not talking about the internal control communication and deficiencies. Additional matters to be communicated which complement the requirement of SA are identified in other SAs. Further matters not required by this other SA may be required to be communicated by law and regulation, by the agreement with the entity, or by additional requirement applicable to the engagement. So there may be certain matters which are for which there are no specific requirement to communicate, that can be communicated under SA 260. That's somewhat a residual type of reporting. But Mind it, this is not the reporting. Only one letter is given under SA 260. Number of letters can be given under SA 260 because it talks about any matters, and those matters may arise at a different times. So you may be communicating as an auditor to the entity, the persons who are in charge of the governance, any time in between. I have already explained to you the identification of those charged with governance, factors to be considered, as I have explained in SA 265, governance structure, circumstances, what are the legal requirements, and sometimes we don't know who is the management, who is the in charge of governance, because it's a small entity. Then we can tell to the entity that we are saying that these are the person in charge of governance, and we will be reporting for that purpose to them. If identification is not possible, he should come to an agreement. That's what I have explained to you, with the entity about to whom such matters to be communicated, to whom they consider the management or in charge of the governance. And I have already explained you about the management. The persons with executive responsibility for the conduct of entity operation is a management, and matters to be communicated. And if I just explained you about the governance, the person who are in charge of governance are generally not connected to the day-to-day operations of the companies. They are generally the board of directors, the audit committees. They are not concerned with the day-to-day operating instructions of the company. So they are the person who are in charge of the governance. But sometimes when you are not able to identify it in a small company, then the standard says you should have an arrangement with the company or entity that to whom we will be calling a person in charge of management and governance. What are the matters to be communicated to them? These are the matters. Matters of independence, matters of findings, matters of responsibility, matters of scope. Any matters of independence. You see, in the beginning of the year, when beginning of the communications, starting the commencement of the audit, you may like to communicate to the company, management or governance that we are independent as regards to your company. And you may have a questions on it. Why it is required under SA 260? If there is a requirement itself under the Companies Act and other acts that auditor has to be independent. So why this is being repeated in SA 260? Dear student, the question is valid, okay, but you see, to improve a transparency in the system of audit process, this SA 260 makes one additional requirement that before you start an auditing, tell to the persons responsible for the governance that we are independent. We are independent. Give it in writing. Dear student, under these auditing standards issued by the PCOB, there is a requirement of that. One, the auditor has to communicate in writing to the persons in charge of the governance that they are independent. Just to emphasize the matters more and to give a confidence to the people who are in charge of the governance that you are independent. Whereas the independence is the basic element of the auditing process. But just to make it more transparent, more clear in the audit process to the governance persons that you are independent. This is one of the matter which is communicated under SA 260. Maybe that during the audit, when you commence the audit, you came across a certain issues which you want to discuss with the management. You are not getting information about that issue. There is not a good cooperation of the people in that company. The officers are not cooperating well. This is the communication you want to make the person who are in charge of the governance. Yes, you can communicate it in between also, so that you can carry out your audit process in a more smooth way, you can get a sufficient appropriate evidence for expression of your opinion on the financial statements. So that can be communicated. Any findings which you feel that may appear in the audit report which are of so importance that you want a discussions before formulating your opinion under SA 700, 705 and 706, you want to discuss it with the management. So you can communicate your finding to the management and person in charge of the governance. Responsibility. What is your responsibility? Again, you will ask a question. These responsibilities are written under the Companies Act. Responsibilities are prescribed under the other regulatory act. What is the importance? What is the importance that communicating separately by another letter? They restrained it only to make clear to the person in charge of governance that we have what is the auditor's responsibility, what is their responsibility, the management responsibility. And in SA 700 report, we do write what is the management responsibility, what is the auditor's responsibility. Before writing it in the main audit report, we will communicate to the persons that in charge of the governance that these are your responsibility, these are our responsibility, so that it's clear on the record. What is the scope of the audit? For that purpose, you can communicate to the management that this is the scope. Generally, we give an engagement letter to the management at the beginning, at the commencement of the audit. There is a SA 210 which talks about this. So that and if you want to tell the scope of your audit, you can communicate under SA 260 to the management. What are the independence matters? This is all which you have to write to the management. The findings may be material weaknesses in the control, significant matters arising in the audit reports. You feel that maybe the questions of provisioning on the debtors. If you feel that the provisioning done by the management and in the financial statement is so less, it is maybe that figure is 50 crores and you feel that the provisioning should be 200 crores and which will materially affect your opinion in the financial statement, you may have a qualified report because of this 150 crores less provision in the financial statement. Before putting it in your qualifications in your audit report, you would like to discuss with the management, higher management, and that you want to discuss it. How you will communicate? You will communicate it through the letter prescribed under SA 260. So these are the matters of finding which you can do it. Auditors should communicate any difficulty in finding evidence management when you are not getting a good cooperation from the officers of the companies. You are not able to access the audit evidences because of certain limitations. You can discuss with the management by writing a letter under SA 260. The responsibility of management is to prepare this responsibility. We have to tell to the management that what is your responsibility, what is our responsibility as an auditors. So this can be written. The scope, this is only explanatory. Otherwise, everybody knows it. The management must be knowing because they have made, while appointing the auditors, they know what is the scope of the audit under this particular act. But just to clarify it, to bring a transparency in the audit process, you want to communicate them by extra letter under SA 260. When and how the audit matters are communicated, documentations, these are the audit matters reported under laws and regulations. So the communications may be on these accounts, and which I have already explained to you. Now, when it should be communicated, as I told you that this can be communicated anytime. The communication starts, there may be a number of communication, maybe 20 times or 30 times or 40 letters you are writing under SA 260 to the management. When you commence the audit, in between of the audit, at the end of the audit, you can write anytime. That's the timing of this, writing of this letter to the management. Now you have a case study. SA 260 communication with those charged with the governance deals with the auditor's responsibility to communicate with those charged with governance in relation to an audit of financial statement. Explain the examples of matters that might be communicated to them by the auditors. Examples. This is one of the case study. The examples may be, as I told you, that while doing the auditing, you came up with the audit findings that provisions for debtors should be 200 crores. What is made in the financial statement is only 50 crores. 150 crores is a material amount in that respect and will affect your audit opinion. And therefore, this may be the matters which you want to communicate to the, before taking a view while making a report under SA 700, 705 and 706, you want to communicate and discuss these matters which is of importance with the management so that you can take a considered view and that view is factually correct and that view is right and you want to discuss with the management. You can write a letter to management, governance persons that we want to discuss these matters with you before we arrive at certain conclusions on it. So that is examples of the which can be SA 260. There is a dispute going on and somebody has filed a claim against you, against the company of 500 crores and that damages is almost sure it has to be paid by the company. Matter is pending in the court of law, but the case is so weak that the company has to pay that much of damages. Company is not ready, they have not made a provisions for such type of payment of damages. This is a matter of importance which you can communicate to the management at SA 260 before arriving your opinion on financial statements. So these are the matters of importance which you can do. You have conducted your audit. In the process, you felt that you are not getting a good cooperation from the officers and staff of the company, and due to that, you are not able to collect sufficient and appropriate audit evidences. There are certain instances of non-cooperations which you have noted down, and you want to communicate it to the management that to discuss it, to sort it out so that you can perform your auditing well, calculate and obtain the sufficient and appropriate audit evidences for your expression of opinion on the financial statement. This may be another example which can be communicated through SA 260. So these are the case study, the overall scope of audit. These are the matters which can be communicated under SA 260. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit, major issue discussed. In the case of a listed company, auditor will communicate those charged governance to issue a statement that engagement team and others in the firm appropriate the firm and when applicable network have complied with the relevant ethical requirements regarding independence. That's independence, because now in our as per our Chartered Accountant Act, we have a networking of the firm where the two firms are working together and they are exchanging their resources, maybe the persons or their knowledge with other firms and to get audits. So if you are a network of firm, there is a company, there is a B company of chartered accountants, and both are our network firm. They are working together. They are an independent accounting firm, but they are working together as per the network regulation of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. The other network regulations firm, A company may be the auditors who is independent, but B company has got a certain interest in that company, and because you are exchanging their resources, their manpowers and everything, then you may not be independent to that extent, because that networking firm has an interest in the company. So this should be communicated to them. You have to ensure to the management that yes, we have constituted a team which such type of the issue we have already taken into consideration, and the team which we have engaged in your company is independent. In spite of the fact we have a networking with this company and this another firm of accounting. So that's all about the SA 260.